Hi, and welcome to this webinar on a series I like to call Where to Find. Today's Where to Find Resources Online the topic is COVID-19 Updates and Resources. This is a webinar hosted by the Greenwich Hospital Medical Library. My name is Veronica. I'm the Consumer Health Librarian here at Greenwich Hospital. For those of you who are not familiar with me or what I do, I help people find health information, whether it be through print or digital resources. And by helping to narrow down and go through the deluge of misinformation that may be online, I help them make better healthcare decisions for themselves. And what seems to be the topic on everybody's mind lately is COVID-19. And it is also the subject of a lot of misinformation and falsehoods. And with everything, the research is still ongoing, even to this day. It's very important to know where to find reliable updates for it, which is what prompted me to make this webinar in the first place. So before we begin, I just like to begin every webinar with a disclaimer that this presentation is for educational and informational purposes only. I have provided 2 hotlines where there will be experts that can answer your questions about symptoms, concerns, or wanting to find a testing site near you. The first number is the YNHH call center. That's the number right there. And then I also give this presentation to New York, the new consumers. And so I put down the New York State COVID-19 hotline as well. And as I am not clinically trained, always consult your doctor or other healthcare provider for medical advice before making any lifestyle decisions that might impact your health. And all of the websites that I'm recommending are not paying me to recommend them, and therefore that is why I note that there are no sponsored content will be featured during this presentation. So for today, I've outlined some objectives. This presentation will be split into 2 parts. The first part will be the 3 types of online sources regarding COVID-19. First part is updates on COVID-19, such as where to find the number of cases, any updates on vaccinations, research, and just general news updates. The general information will be comprising the second part, which is just where to find information on preventing the spread and stress management. And the third part will be regarding state-specific resources. I will be primarily just talking about the state of Connecticut, what resources primarily for the state of Connecticut regarding COVID. And then the other half of the presentation will be regarding other ways besides the internet to look up information through books, other media such as YouTube and podcasts, and last but not least, the graphic medicine, which is a subject that I think a lot of people will find interest in, and I'm very eager to talk about, but we'll save that for the end of the presentation. So, where to find COVID-19 updates with regards to international domestic cases? For the interest of time, I will be only showing and navigating through one website here, but I highly recommend all of them. But I will be going over the Johns Hopkins Coronavirus Data Center because it is not only is it very informative, but it actually explains how to read the information on it. So here is the website. This is what it looks like. So yes, the tracking is over here for global cases and trends. The primary thing that you might want to look for, especially when it comes to figuring out which states will be open, which states are having a higher rate of positive cases over the last 2 weeks. This is the type of information that state governments, the federal government use to figure out what phase of reopening their state is at, or whether they need to close off their state to other places when it comes to traveling. So that is why it's really important that people be able to know where to look up this information. So when it comes to this site, I recommend this particular link, Have States Flatten the Curve, to see if new cases are rising or declining. So you can see here, we have all the states here. in various shades of colors. It explains over here how to use this graphic, and then it talks about the daily confirmed new cases over a 7-day period. And it talks over here, the greener the background, the bigger the downward trend, the redder the background, the bigger the upward trend of new cases. So for instance, if we wanted to check out Connecticut, we just click right here, or we look in the states. As you can see, it also has a graphic right here on how to read it. And if you click along this line, it'll show you exactly the rise of new cases that are occurring. So we're just gonna go back to home for a second so I can show you the other. And then there's a global cases section. Yeah, okay, so we're back to the tracking, and this is the other link that I wanted to show, which is the impact of opening and closing decisions by state. I like this graph because it actually shows policies that were made during this whole period of pandemic, from the start of it, which was around March for most states, to now. Right now we're just seeing Alabama, so I'm just going to quickly click over to Connecticut, for instance. As you can see, all these little dots up here are reopening and closing policy decisions, and they are clearly marked as to what period during the pandemic they were actually made. And it actually tells you how to read this as well. Downloading the chart, how to read the bar lines and the policies. So for instance, the most recent policy was on October 1st. You just click here, it talks about how, oh, okay, so the recent one is here. So Government Law created a program to assist small businesses impacted by COVID-19. Not only is this great just for your own personal information, but this is a great resource for just education. Because so many things have been happening at once that it might be hard to track exactly how certain policies are affecting the rate at which COVID has been spread. So this is a great just educational tool. So that's all I wanted to show for this website. I highly recommend the New York Times coronavirus outbreak. We're going to continue. I won't be able to show it, but in that specific resource, you can actually look up vaccination research, and it has its own COVID tracker. And New York Times, a lot of the time articles you have to pay for to view them. For the coronavirus outbreak section, all you have to do is just make a free account, and then you'll have access to all of the live updates that they do, as well as the vaccine researcher page. So when it comes to COVID-19 research updates, the National Institute of Health Coronavirus Research page is a great resource. That website is mostly for clinical and medical professionals, but they do have a blog where they list updates that have been done. For instance, on the Resedimir product, sorry. So now, but I like to point out this specific resource, Science News, because it has a lot of great articles on the coronavirus available for free, and their sources have been vetted and they're clearly researched. They always have links to the studies that they post, and they're very remdesivir. That's what it was. I was trying to remember how to pronounce it. Remdesivir. So, for instance, if you look up any article here, can supplements really fight COVID-19? How will Trump COVID-19 treatments work together? What does COVID-19 vaccine efficacy mean? We click on one of these, and they talk about an international study that found no benefit in this particular drug. And I like the fact that they actually have a link to the authors of the ones who write these papers, so that we know exactly what their credentials are. That's always really good to see. Whenever you're evaluating any kind of website, you want to make sure that the people know what they're talking about. So over here, you just have a very easy to read article that summarizes the study. So this, you can see there's a lot of links. These links go directly to the articles and studies that are related to the topic of the article. So I just like to recommend this website because it's very easy to digest and read information that is reliable and full of credible information. So if there's anybody who is, for instance, attempting to get on unemployment or trying to figure out what the government's federal response is to COVID-19, there are two sources. Coronavirus.gov is the one done in conjunction with the White House and the CDC, which is led by the Coronavirus Task Force. This is their official website. I would go over it, except that a lot of this links link to the CDC anyway. So instead, I'm going to go take you to USA.gov's coronavirus website list, as that shows every single department of the federal government. So the top websites up here are the stimulus payment updates from the Internal Revenue Service, Centers for Disease Control. They have the FEMA's facts about coronavirus. And over here, we have in alphabetical order all the administration's pages on COVID, from the Consumer Product Safety Commission, Department of Labor, Veteran Affairs, as you can see. I just want to bring your attention to the Food and Drug Administration's page, because they actually talk a lot about the drugs and the diagnostic testing. And when they had when there was that update about convalescent plasma where they authorized its use, this is the page where you can read more about that. So you can go down all the way to here for information on PPE, frequently asked questions. And if you go down here to popular coronavirus topics, one of them is the coronavirus treatments page, where they discuss all the products that have been approved by the FDA or granted authorization. So here's the plasma, and there's the remdesivir, which might be, which given those articles and its findings, I don't know how long that's going to be used up, but that's the information that's currently available. So if you're just interested in what the current treatments are, this is the best place to go for it. And then we'll move on to just general information on COVID-19, and the very first thing that should come up in your mind is the Center for Disease Control and Prevention. That's where pretty much any website will link to when it comes to COVID-19 information. So I want to go over 2 pages on the CDC website, daily activities and going out, since we're approaching the holiday season, and a lot of people may be wondering, how are we going to celebrate the holidays this year, what with all these COVID-19 restrictions? And I think all of us are feeling a lot more stress and anxiety than usual. So I wanted to show you how to navigate the CDC's page on coping with stress and anxiety. So I'm just going to connect us to the CDC website. So right here, you just go to coronavirus disease 2019. So if you want to go to the daily activities and going out, you click on the Your Health tab. Daily activities and going out is right here. And then they have a whole section on going out, events and gatherings. As you can see, all different categories of where you could possibly go out. And then they have attending gatherings, Halloween, hosting gatherings, and holidays specifically. And they have all 3 holidays up there. And they have just general tips and guidelines for how to avoid the spread. A lot of it is specifically saying just don't have a lot of people at your gathering. Try not to travel to places where there's a high risk of spread or a high rate of positivity. So this is just something that a lot of people could go to if they're unsure of how to approach the holiday season in a safe way, this is where they can go for tips. And then if we want to go to coping and stress, yep, so it's in the same section, your health. You're going to go to your health. It's not in here, so you'd have to say view all. And then stress and coping would be all the way down here. So you can see they have also really helpful categories: stress with work, coping with healthcare, coping for children, responding to loss, and they even have stopped the spread of rumors, reducing stigma. And over here, if there is, there are a large portion of the community that's suffering because they can't attend support groups. They also have support groups for alcohol and substance abuse, support for veterans, support for teens and young adults. So they just have a subsection for any category or demographic you can think of. So this is a very helpful site for sure. The other website that I would recommend is the World Health Organization. And while a lot of the information on here may be also for medical staff and healthcare providers, there are two sections I wanted to draw your attention to, which is the Mythbuster section and the healthy, #healthy at home sections. So let's just go to the website. So their specific website on coronavirus disease, COVID-19 pandemic, I'd go straight to advice for the public. And this is their page for the public use. So this will be where more consumer-friendly materials are. So we're gonna go to the Mythbuster section, and this is probably one of my favorite resources, because all of this misinformation that's been gathered over the last couple months is here. For instance, who remembers that there was a rumor that said that 5G mobile networks spread the COVID? And if you click on one of them, it goes right to here, and it has an explanation for why that cannot possibly be the case, as well as a video explaining it. And if you could just look through all of these and see, like, the fact is that methanol, ethanol, or bleach does not prevent or cure COVID. They have a cute little infographic that you can use to share on your social media to help not just yourself but others from believing this stuff when it's on the news. So anytime that something on the news might sound like wrong about COVID, you can always check here to see if it's been added to this list, and then you'll know for sure that it's wrong. A lot of great stuff in here. From mosquitoes to hydrochloroquine, hot peppers. Which one's shoes about? The likelihood of shoes spreading COVID-19 is very low. I didn't even know that was a rumor. So let us now go to the hashtag. Let's go back to the main page, advice for the public. Apologies that the internet's being slower than usual today. Okay, we're back here. And now you have to scroll all the way down to the #healthy@home page, where they have separate categories for when people were in quarantine, and there may still be some people who might have to go and quarantine once again because we're now in a second wave. They have categories of staying physically active, healthy diet, healthy parenting, quitting tobacco while under quarantine, and how to maintain mental health. So if we just go to here, they have a lot of great tips on how to maintain physical exercise, for instance, for different ages, especially what's recommended. That all adults should do at least 150 of a moderate intense physical activity throughout the week. And then there's some social media graphics with like examples on how to actually be physically active during quarantine. And I think that the section for parents is especially helpful, because it can be I can't imagine how stressful it must be to be a parent and having to especially if your kids are virtually learning from home, having to stay in this situation. They have videos with explanations on COVID and how to wash your hands. And they even have a link to a free ebook about, picture book about how kids can fight COVID-19. So we're actually going to be talking about this later in the presentation, but I highly recommend checking that out. And so in terms of general information for COVID-19, you definitely have your news sources that can provide information. Even Google and Bing have, in their own ways, been really great about providing the right sources. When you first search, as you can see right here, I searched up coronavirus update in Bing and COVID-19 updates there. So right over here, they talk about the cases in Fairfield County where I live. And then they have the coronavirus updates here. They set up their own little categories like statistics, trends, symptoms, treatment, etc. And as you can see, the very first top result is for COVID-19 updates is the CDC. So, and then they have their own categories right here. So I really am glad that Google and Bing, as the top search engines of today, they have the right resources right at the top. And then you also have your CNN, BBC, or whatever local news station that you subscribe to on a daily basis. You can get general information on COVID from there. They should be providing it. However, I will put a very big disclaimer for be careful, evaluate your sources wherever you get your news from. Evaluate all of the resources that are given. This is how a lot of the misinformation and rumors spread, is because people do not look into what's being told to them. You have to ask yourself these questions. Who runs or created the site or app? What is the site or app promising or offering? When was this information written or reviewed? Where did this information come from? And why does this site or app exist? Is it selling something? And this can be, you can just change the wording and apply this to who is saying this on the news, where is this news coming from, etc. So, but when you're searching for your own online or you see an article, you can use these resources to help you evaluate them, which is how I've been doing my job. So for instance, this checklist is called Trust It or Trash It. Let's see if I can bring it up. Yep, here it is. So that's what this helpful PDF looks like. So you can use it to critically think about the quality of health information found on websites and booklets. Not only does it say what questions to ask, it also gives the examples of whether to trust it or not. So for instance, if you find the author's name, and you can trash it if you don't know who wrote it and there's no information on the author's background or experience. It goes over all the questions that I just mentioned in the PowerPoint slide. So that's one of the really great resources that I recommend. And then Medline Plus is one of my favorite free databases for health information. Not only does it provide accurate and reliable and easy to digest information, it even gives you if you go to this tab right here, videos and tools, it gives you a link to their toolkit tutorial for evaluating internet health information. So I won't go over the whole tutorial, but as you can see right here, they're going to be showing examples of a reliable website and a not reliable website. And if you want to know which one it is, try out the tutorial and see for yourself. So when it comes to Connecticut, there are two resources that I recommend, the Department of Health and Greenwich's own website. This is obviously for community members of Greenwich. For a more wider picture of Connecticut as a state, you would obviously go to the Department of Health. Over here in the Department of Health, they have the governor's press releases. He just released one yesterday at 4 p.m. And if you subscribe to the press releases, you'll be able to know to the Department of Health. You'll be able to get notifications through your email of when his next press release will be. I believe it's every week, but don't quote me on that. So let's go to the Department of Health websites. So if you go to Department of Health, click on either here or up here for coronavirus information. This is what the page looks like. So you start off with COVID-19 data tracker, the latest guidance. The Connecticut Travel Advisory in Effect tab is very important for those who want to travel. You really want to keep up to date on which states will require you to come, and if you come back to Connecticut, will require you to self-quarantine for 14 days. Otherwise, and fill out a form. Otherwise, you may be in violation and have to pay a $500 fine. So that's very important. The most recent states have been added are California and Massachusetts. So those get added into here. And this is where you would also find the form to fill out if you are coming from a travel advisory state. So as you can see, the amount of resources in here are practically endless, from where to get tested, vaccine advisory group, what's open in Connecticut right now. For instance, the only thing that's still closed primarily is bars. And then we have the long care facilities, guidance on Halloween, what resources are available for returning to school next year if you have kids who are going to school. This is the videos that will be posted whenever Governor Lamont does a latest COVID-19 update. But the updates are, and this is where you would be able to subscribe for the news updates. The updates are also here, the press releases links, if you just click there. As you can see, the latest one was from yesterday. And this is what it would look like, his news conference on voting. And the only other thing I wanted to look up and show you was the CT COVID-19 knowledge base. If there's a question that you have specifically for COVID, it's most likely going to be in this knowledge base. It's basically a forum where people can ask questions. Give me 1 second. See if I can bring this up if I just close this out. Okay, yep. So clicking on that link, COVID-19 knowledge base. So right here, the latest guidance, what you need to know, that'll just take you to the news press release. If you were wondering what are the rules for the reopening when it comes to activities, business, families, children, official guidelines on the reopen. Say, for instance, your family and children, you want to look up that specific category. And then it will talk about with regards to if your family or children are looking to see like, oh, what's open, what can we do? It'll show you exactly what to do. So it's just a really easier way to search up questions as opposed to going through the whole website and trying to find it on your own. You just look at the articles that are already in the knowledge base, and it's pretty succinct and easy to digest. So. And then Greenwich website has its own local press releases, has the phase guidance and links to the CDC as well as the Department of Health, and it just has FAQ lists specific to each county. I don't have time to go over it now, but that's important for those of us who are living in Greenwich to look into that specifically. So now we're on to the other half of the presentation. We're going off the computer. And off the internet and trying to find other formats to look up information on COVID. So it might surprise you to know that there are some books on COVID-19 out right now, despite the fact that we are still in the middle of it. For instance, Amazon has over 10,000 newly published books on the pandemic when I looked it up. However, a lot of them have not been, it's important to note that not all of them have been vetted for accuracy. Some have been published too soon and contain some biased perspectives. For instance, I looked into a book on Amazon and it turned out that the author was both a medical professional and an evangelical priest. So a lot of the book was regarding from a religious perspective. So that's one of the things that you should keep in mind, not only when evaluating websites, but you have to evaluate books as well. That's why instead of trying to find COVID-19 books that are out now. You can actually look up book lists that talk about just how generally virus spreads, or past outbreaks such as the SARS and MERS and the influenza virus. So one of the books that I found really interesting that I've been picking up and reading through is The Pandemic Century, 100 Years of Panic, Hysteria, and Hubris by Mark Honigsbaum. These are from the links that I found this book on. I'll show you one of them just as an example. From the American Libraries magazine. They have a great list of different books on just pandemics and how diseases usually spread. That can give a lot of insight, even if it's not about COVID specifically, gives a lot of insight on how these kind of things spread and how different reactions to it have impacted history as a whole. They have sectioned this off into adult books as well as children's books. The youth books start here. So if you're an educator or a parent who wants to give your teenager or a kid something to read so they can be in the know, this is where you would look. The other source would be Library Journal, which also has a pretty good list, not just of books, but that's not what I wanted to show. I think it's an ad. Okay, yeah, okay, I don't know what that was, yeah. So, what public libraries need to know about the coronavirus, not only do they have websites, that's where I got my science news updates, but they also have books, other books that are not on the previous list. Most of these are gonna be for adults, but these are also worth looking into. And then Book Riot actually produced a list of books about living during quarantine. As we all know, we were all doing our own thing, from baking to trying a new hobby, working from home. And some of us may find may find that our own experiences have led us into being in a really lonely place, but sometimes reading about what other people have gone through in the same situation can be cathartic and helpful. So these are a few notable books that have been published about living through quarantine. And so I mentioned earlier that you guys may recognize this cover from when we talked about the World Health Organization. Well, these books were part of Emory University's ebook list. They actually put out a challenge to people to make ebooks regarding COVID-19 for kids. And these would be available for free to people to browse. So some of these here, you can definitely just click on and they'll immediately bring it up, and you can read it to your kid at night or have them read it on their own. Or if you're a teacher, have them read it while in the classroom. The one that I've also mentioned is We're Gonna Be Okay is also down here. If you just click there again, it'll come up right here. Just be able to scroll through and read it through. And these are the authors in case you want to pick up a physical copy. So there have been other ways to learn through social media, podcasts, and YouTube. When I specifically say social media, I mean Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. The National Institute of Health and CDC all have all of their own social media. In fact, I was able to watch on Facebook a grand round with Dr. Fauci himself being interviewed at Walter Reed Medical Hospital. This was maybe 2 months ago, and this is the slide from that same presentation where they talked about how the structure of the virus itself is able to permeate into our cells, and that is why it's so hard to get rid of. So it did reveal a lot of good information, and it's a great way to keep updated. So I would definitely subscribe to the social media of those specific organizations. There are some podcasts. The CDC has their own weekly COVID-19 briefing, which is basically just summarizing the briefings that are written in their news updates section. NPR has a great series on the coronavirus called the Coronavirus Crisis Series. This is what it looks like. A lot of good articles ranging from all topics related to COVID, from the economy to the spread, how it's impacting various locations in the United States and globally. And then CNN has its own fact versus fiction series on coronavirus with chief medical correspondent Dr. Sanjay Gupta. And right here, the very first topic is Talking Turkey. With Thanksgiving just around the corner, coronavirus surging, he gives tips and advice on that. Halloween canceling. I think one of the ones I really liked was where it's a previous one, this was back in the summer, but they had a really good talk about how he was able to come to a decision for his children's schooling. So it's just great to hear a voice, especially if you're quarantined inside, that is reliable and with good information. And on YouTube, some people may recognize the name Dr. Mike as Dr. Mike Varshovsky. He is a well-known family medicine doctor. And he has his own YouTube channel. He's very prolific on social media, but his YouTube channel I definitely recommend because he not only deals with health updates on COVID-19, he also discusses news updates on COVID-19 that may be fraudulent or full of misinformation, and he kind of diagnoses the news, you could say, with his own expertise. So this is what it looks like. This is the whole playlist. If you go on his channel and just look up Dr. Mike and go to playlist, you'll just look for the one named Coronavirus Truth, and he has a whole video series on just that. And I think he even spoke with Dr. Fauci, yep. So you can even watch his interview with Dr. Fauci and see what they had to discuss about. And this was circulating earlier in the year, but in a nutshell is a really great YouTube channel that talked about how the coronavirus spread. And I believe that they haven't really done that many more since then.
The media spinning the truth and pushing false narratives? Well, take a look at this. Over the last 3 years, while the establishment media was pushing...
Sorry for the advertisement, but yes, so they have a really great video that's really well animated and full of great sources as well. As you can see, all of their sources are down here. And this is what I recommended to everyone when they were just finding out about the coronavirus, because it not only talks about how it's spread, but it talks about how it exactly affects the body and the lungs and all that information that was very unclear to the public. So the last part is graphic medicine. And for those of you who may not know what that term means, it's basically the integration of the word graphic novel and medicine. So, defined by the National Library of Medicine, the graphic medicine is the use of comics to tell personal stories of illness and health. They play a valuable role in reflecting or changing cultural perspectives on medicine, relating the subjective patient, caregiver, provider experience, enabling discussion of difficult subjects, and helping other sufferers or caregivers. So, I think what may be missing from our lives, especially with us all self-quarantining, is seeing other people's perspective when it comes to the coronavirus and how it's been impacting them. Not only has it been very tough for us, but it's been tough for essential workers who cannot quarantine because they are needed on the front lines. The Asian American population has faced a lot of prejudice as such when people realized it was from China, for instance, and just in general, how does a person who had COVID-19, how did they go through this illness? So there are a lot of great resources for COVID-19 comics or graphic medicine. I'll show you this one. If you go to graphicmedicine.org, it's basically a blog post where they all constantly update their list of COVID-19 comics, and at the very top They have specific categories from educational to ethical, comics provided by healthcare providers. As you can see, there's a wide array of talent and artists, and all showing their perspective. Some of this stuff is on social media as well through Instagram. But as you can see, it's a huge array of different perspectives, different types of artwork. I personally believe that a lot in health is hard to understand unless you were there present, but visually being able to see what's going on can help people a lot. Excuse me. The other two are also lists of COVID-19 comics. These are the other ones that I want to bring your attention to because a lot of them are primarily meant to be educational. For instance, this specific comic by Whit Taymor and Allison Schwid, they're specifically trying to debunk COVID-19 myths. This one, How COVID-19 Spreads Our Other Comics, was illustrated by Wayman Cow. And then she actually had to redo it, as you can see, extended revised edition, because she wanted it vetted by a professional. As you can see, it's right here, Dr. Yu Feng Pham. They both worked on it together. Great way to introduce if you're a teacher or a parent that wants to show your child or children exactly how it spreads and how to prevent it from spreading. These are great ways to show that. We talked about different perspectives such as healthcare and from the Asian American community. As you can see, this one has great artistic detail, and it talks about a nurse's time being the ICU. And this one is by Lisa Woolrim. She talks a lot about, she was part of the hashtag I'm Not a Virus trend that was on Instagram, where a lot of Asian American artists contributed comics displaying how they have been the victims of prejudice all throughout this pandemic. So it's really important for people to be able to express that perspective and for us to read them. I'm going to end this presentation on a lighter note with, it takes special people to find the humor in this kind of situation, but the humor is what helps us move forward. So I'm really, this is one of the ones that really made me laugh, the Coping comic by Gemma Correll. What I think I'll be doing during the shelter-in-place order, what I'm actually doing. I definitely agree with her about learning how to bake, but actually just stress eating. In her case, it's peanut butter cups, but in my case, it would be Oreos. So I think we all can relate to what she's talking about here. So thank you very much for watching and listening in. Please register for more upcoming webinars that I have in November and December. The next webinar that I'm doing is on MyChart, the electronic record, which you may use to look up your lab results and schedule appointments. If you're interested in that, please go to this link on the events page at Greenwich Hospital website or call this number to register for that. I have listed the call center numbers that I mentioned earlier, and my contact information is down here. I'm definitely available for in-person or Zoom appointments during the hours of 9 to 4 p.m. Monday through Friday. Thank you very much, and have a great day.